be curious for sure.
Mhm.
Be willing to be self-aware, and if you're not, learn how to be self-aware, and learn from your failures and fail over and over and over again, and learn from that and pick yourself up and make it better. I think failures is, if you're not failing, you're not learning, you're not doing anything differently.
Now, Sonia, when I was looking at your Instagram, I couldn't help but see that you had the Portuguese jersey on. So I was curious. When it went to watching the Euro Cup, did you watch every game and every minute of it?
I watched every game and every minute of it, and I was on my pins and needles.
Yeah. Do you think he's come? You think Ronaldo's going to come to the World Cup?
I do. I think he'll make it. He's
Yeah.
he's so disciplined. I think if anyone can do it, it's him. Or
Mhm.
wishful thinking. I hope he does.
Yeah. Now, the next question is, will he be a starter or is he going to be a super sub? Because he's going to be almost 40 then, or at 40, right?
Yeah. I think he's gonna be there. The purpose of him being there will be to motivate the team.
Hmm.
So I
Okay.
don't know. I think to him it'll matter what position they put him in, but I think to the fans and everyone else, he's just gonna be there to like give that motivation.
Okay. Yeah. That's what I think too. And selfishly, I hope him and Messi and a lot of
Mhm.
the other stars that maybe are a little older, hope they do stay because the World
Yeah.
Cup's going to be in the States this year and it's going to be in Canada as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
So
excited. Hopefully we can catch a game.
yeah, I know you're going to the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. So some of your background is, I believe you're half Portuguese
No, I'm full Portuguese. I was born
or
there.
Portuguese. Okay. 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 And so, what part?
I'm from a little island called São Miguel, which is part of 9 islands that belong to the Azores that are part of Portugal.
Hmm. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So I have a random story about that. So
Okay.
when I was saying, and I was probably an idiot for not doing it. So when I stayed in Porto for about 6 weeks, and I had the opportunity. It was just a flight and everything given to me by a friend to go check out the islands over there, just for hiking and everything. And I was just like, nah, I'm just too lazy. I don't want to
You
take the
didn't
trip.
go?
And they said it was so beautiful. And then I looked up pictures, and I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. The islands are very fresh and green. Like they're not super touristy yet.
Uh huh.
And they're very tiny little towns. It's just an active, like my island is an active volcano, so we have the hot water springs that you can go swimming in. It's absolutely stunning. It's very green everywhere you look. You see
Hmm.
green and you always see the ocean. It's always that view.
I'm gonna have to go back.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go back. So we're a little over halfway throughout the year,
You
and
should.
yeah. And being over halfway throughout the year, I'm curious, what are maybe one or two big revelations that you've had this year?
Revelations that I've had this year. Um, I think for me, just personally, one of the biggest revelations I've had is like I need to stop being so hard on myself
Hmm.
and take the little wins and be proud of myself for the things that I've done. I tend to be like I think in general we all tend to be like really hard on ourselves, and when we accomplish something or we achieve something, it's always like, okay, well, what's next? We don't even have make time to just celebrate those small wins. So I think
Hmm.
halfway through the year, that's really what I'm trying to focus on, and I think it's really good for my mental health.
Yeah. Um, It's ironic that you brought that up because I was having this conversation last week where they were talking about that it seems like it's harder for entrepreneurs or people that just have, I guess, big goals or dreams or just always looking to the future. It's hard to just be happy with where you are right now and accept that because a lot of times this we see the gap. So even if we made a lot of progress, we still see like we're so far away from where I'm trying to go or where I desire to go. And so tactically getting those small wins, what have you done differently this year to force yourself to do that? Is it simply journaling? Is it acknowledgement? What have you done tactically?
Yeah, I mean, journaling is a big piece of it, but I started journaling years ago for other reasons, and that's just helped me along. But I have a digital journal, not a regular journal. And so in my digital journal, I'm able to create like other notebooks and things like that. And because I was journaling a lot, I created a digital book where every day I just go in and I put in my to-do list for the day. And it's nothing extravagant. It's not like everything, but it's something simple like send out that email. And what it does to me at the end of the day is when I look at that list and I see that I have 20 things on it, but I have like 11 check marks, it makes me feel really good and like I really accomplished something and it
Mhm.
allows me to like really take on those little wins.
Mhm. And so I'm curious on what inspired you to let's dive into a little bit of your backstory. What inspired you to be an entrepreneur after all? How did you find it?
I've always like at since a young age, I've always had like I've always wanted to run a business. I've always had like side hustles where I worked full time and I had little side hustles. What I'm doing now in tech, there's a couple of different things around it. Entrepreneurship is one part of it, and I kind of like went into it by an accident, but it is naturally something that I love doing. So it just came naturally to me.
Mhm. Now, the age old question: Can are you born an entrepreneur or can you develop into an entrepreneur? What do you think?
I think I think everyone's an entrepreneur. I think big companies, corporations out there have entrepreneurs within them. So I don't think entrepreneurship represents you owning your own business.
Mhm.
I think there are entrepreneurs working in large companies that are coming up with great ideas and new product development. Those are all entrepreneurs. So I think entrepreneurship is really someone who can think outside the box and generate new ideas or new
Mhm.
business potentials. So I think there's a little bit of an entrepreneur in most of us. Maybe not all, but I think there's a little
Mhm.
bit in all of us.
I like that. I like that. So it's more of a mentality, more of a mindset, and then also, I think formally, sometimes people in corporate call those people entrepreneurs now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So, so I saw that you had two. You founded two companies, right?
Mhm.
And what's the backstory to starting with the first company?
Yeah, well, they both sort of have very similar
Mm,
story, because they both happen sort of at the same time. So I'm managing director for a company called Konverge, and Konverge does software development.
mhm,
And within the Konverge company, a bunch of us one day just sort of had these ideas to start these 2 products, and we built these products within the Konverge group. So we used some of the resources, and then what happened was we had a couple people working on these, 2 companies, and slowly everyone sort of left. And then it got to the point where I was the only one from the original founding team that was left in the company with these products.
mhm,
And so I had to make a decision there. What do I do? Do I scrap these and just, go do something else? Or am I going to take this on myself and really do something with it? And that's really what I did. I looked at what we had and I said, we're going to scrap all of this. We're going to completely rebuild. We're going to put together a proper business plan around it, and we're going to make this successful. So I started with one of the products and took that from scratch and built it up. And then with the second product, I just did what I had done with the first one because I had sort of built a template.
mhm,
Obviously, different industries, requires different types of marketing and things like that. But I took the products from where they were, which was sort of a failure. They weren't really doing well. There was no customers, and I worked with a development team to rebuild the technology, the way the product worked, and then I built a marketing team to start marketing the product. And now we are a global company selling the product all over the world. And right now we're on our way to meet our quota for the year, so it's really good.
That's awesome to hear. I heard a very interesting thing right there when you said everyone left and abandoned ship, and it was
Yeah,
just you. So,
yeah.
um, how's that moment when you're just y- you look around, you're like, "Where's everybody out?" And it's just me, and then you're essentially having to go out and reform an entirely new, different team.
Yeah, one thing that I'm really good at is, I'm really good at taking something that already exists
Hmm.
and working on it and making it better. I'm not necessarily the type of person that will I can, but I'm not necessarily the person who takes something from scratch.
Hmm.
I'm a middle child, so I grew up with hand-me-downs, and so I think that's sort of my personality. So how I saw that was as a hand-me-down. the whole team left and I got handed down these products. And now I have an opportunity to, like a dress that was handed down to me. Can I hem this? I learned how
Mhm.
to hem as a child because I wanted to sort of alter things. So to me, that was just an opportunity to take a hand me down and be like, I'm going to do something with this.
That's one of the most interesting things that I almost want to poll every entrepreneur, every leader now, just to kind of see like, for one, do you have any siblings and what order you're in, and see if that goes with it. Because I'm wondering. So I'm an only child, so I'm wondering what does that mean for only children? Because I think I've heard that the older sibling, the oldest one is typically a little more. They have to grow up a little more faster because there's younger ones, and so those are more of a in a leadership role and stuff like that. So I'm very curious on that. I don't know.
Yeah.
The only thing I've heard about only children is that sometimes they're a little selfish and self-centered. So.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
So yeah, I'm very curious on that. So if anyone's listening has research on that, I would love to hear that and see if there's any like connection with that, because
Yeah,
it's
me
very
too.
interesting. Yeah.
Tell us.
So you're in the tech industry. The tech industry is typically heavily male dominated. I don't know the percentages, but I imagine it's going to be 65% upwards probably.
Oh yeah.
Um, yeah. And so I'm curious. The first thing is, how'd you get your start in that industry?
I got into tech by an accident. My background, so when I started my career working, I actually worked in manufacturing, doing operations. So my background was going into a plant and really reinventing and redesigning the plant so that they could automate and not be so dependent on humans. And that's sort of what I did. And then I did a lot of accounting and financials that went along with that. So my background was operations. And then in the midst of that, I sort of got recruited to this tech company who sort of needed that done. When I started at a very basic level, but then I saw the need in this one particular company for operations to tie into all the other departments because they weren't really doing it. So I sort of just stepped up and I'm like, hey, have you guys thought about this and this and that? And so I became the operations manager within a couple of years of being in there. And so I just sort of worked my way in from there. But yeah, it was a total accident. It's not like I wanted to be a techie or anything. I do
Mhm.
love it now though.
Yeah. And so I'm curious. I don't, this is let's see how I'll work this. What are some things that maybe only a woman would understand when it comes to working in the tech industry, or even just growing a business and things like that, that probably only a woman would understand?
Only a woman would understand. I mean, I could say like the typical things, but I'm gonna try not to. I think for me, it was I'm gonna give the advice that worked for me. For me, it
Okay.
was about being really curious,
Hmm.
not sitting back and watching everyone else ask questions and do the work. It was about really curiosity. I wasn't invited to that meeting. I don't know what's going on, but I'm gonna ask if I can because I'm just curious about what they're doing. And just like really inserting myself in places I didn't belong.
Hmm.
And that gave me the opportunity to start learning. Like, listen, at the time, I didn't know anything about business analysis and code development and QA and project management. But because I became so curious about all the different roles and I started getting involved, what started happening is as someone would leave the company, I'd be like, "Oh, do we have a replacement for that person yet?" No. Okay, well, this person gave 2 weeks notice. There's no way we're gonna find someone in that time. It's gonna take at least a month or two. Can I fill in the meantime? Because I now can spend 2 weeks with the person that is leaving who can sort of get me up to date. I can take notes and I'll fill in until we find someone. And I also am lucky that I worked in a company that was like, yes. So I just started doing that. I remember
Hmm.
one time we had a business analyst that left, and listen, I know nothing about business analysis at this point. I've never done it. I've never put a document together. I
Hmm.
remember I was like drawing little boxes on on a paper and like manually, like not even professional, but I still did it. And I remember my boss at the time, he's like, "This is good." He's like, "This is even better." And I'm like, "Why?" He's like, "'Cause it's so simple and it's easy to understand." And I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah.
So that's sort of what I did. I just inserted myself, and then when I saw an opportunity to, like, go there and learn, that's what I did. And then it got to a point where I had now learned every single role in this company except for coding. I don't know anything about coding. I don't do it, but I can work with developers who are coding and tell them what I need and how to work. I took the time to learn all of the different processes and roles. So
Mhm.
naturally, when the company went through a transition and it got sold, the new investors and owners were like, "Well, you've been here for so many years. You run the company."
Mhm.
Because I knew the ins and outs of the business.
Yeah, to even do that in the first place, to put yourself where you quote unquote don't belong, um,
But
I
I'm
think
the middle child. I don't belong.
that's a good point. That's a good point. See, that's another skill. I hope all middle children out there, because sometimes I hear with middle children that I don't fit in, or I'm overlooked and everything, and all
All
this
the
stuff. And
time.
look at this, you just turned a perceived negative into a positive right there.
Yeah. Well,
So
because, like, you're literally stuck, and
yeah.
I had 2 older siblings and 2 younger, and I was right
Hmm.
in the middle of, 4. So, yeah, I had to be like, "Well, if I want this, I gotta go figure it out." So, I think being a middle child for me was a bonus.
Hmm.
It was a pro, not a con.
Yeah. And so that's also gave you confidence, I see, because um, one thing I would say when somebody is trying to enter a new arena, or put themselves out there, whether it's a business or their career, is they have this sense of feeling like an imposter, and getting over that. I'm sure that you've talked to a lot of founders and people now at this point, that have felt this way as well. So what is some advice that you've given them for that?
Yeah, imposter syndrome. So I used to believe in imposter syndrome, and I
Hmm.
was like, yeah, I've struggled with imposter syndrome. But now that I am where I am and I know what I know, and I've taken the time for self-development
Hmm.
and processing and working through a lot, I don't believe that it was imposter syndrome. I think that it was just me not believing in myself. Because, like, imposter syndrome, what does that mean? Fake it till you make it? Like, I was still doing the work, so I wasn't an imposter. I just didn't believe in myself. I was second guessing myself, but I was doing the work, and I wasn't faking it until I was making it. I was learning as I was going along. So I don't think it's imposter syndrome at all. I think it's really about having that curiosity and doing the work. Even if you get it wrong, trying it out, doing it, learning from that and doing it again. And then learning from that and doing it again until you get to a point where you're like, I'm really good at this.
Yeah, I like that. I'm actually reading a book, or listening to a book now called, I think it's called 6 Degrees, or 6 Degrees of Self-Esteem, or something like that. And so that's very interesting. And there's something in there similar to what he was talking about there, in terms of like, a lot of times it's not really you feel like this thing or that. It's really a issue of self-esteem and belief in yourself. And
Yeah.
throughout our childhoods or wherever, there's something that caused that. And so that's
Mhm.
really the crux of that. And so that's very, very interesting. Now, one thing that I couldn't gloss over is, when you were founding the company, you were diagnosed with breast cancer.
Mhm.
And so at the very beginning of that thing, how did you like even start to like grasp with that, of like, was it did you fall into, I can't believe this is happening to me, or anything, or were you just like immediately like, it's a small bump in the road and I'm just going to keep it moving?
Yeah. So I found out I had breast cancer. I came to work to the office and then I went up the street to do my exams and that's when I got the news. And then I got dressed, came back to the office, worked, and went to an award show in the evening. It was sort of like I didn't process it right away. It took me a little while, but I kept myself so busy with work and what I was doing that I didn't fully grasp the severity, and I think that was a really good thing. There was a couple moments in my journey where obviously I worried and I didn't know what was going on, but for me, it wasn't until I got the survivorship title that I started processing what had happened,
Hmm.
where I had been. Because during it all, I think I sort of my brain just numbed it all, and I just kept myself busy, entertained. Um, yeah, it was just different for me. I didn't really process it right away.
Hmm. And so I have a question on that, because a lot of times I see, and it doesn't even have to be something as severe as cancer or anything. It could just be something that's maybe like a chronic illness or ailment or
Yeah.
something, or just a bad mishap in business. Maybe your business, you lost your business or something. And a lot of times that becomes our identity, and it's hard for us to move on. And for you right there, it sounds like it never became your identity. It just became a situation that was
Oh,
with you for a
sure.
moment. And so, do you think that's some of the personal development and then also keeping yourself busy? Is that kind of how you avoided that?
Yeah, and I mean, like, I knew that my life was gonna change, and I made a lot of changes because physically I had to.
Hmm.
But I think, like, it breast cancer led me to do a lot of self-discovery, a lot of therapy, going through the motions of not knowing where you're gonna end up. You don't find out what stage you're at right away. So I spent a lot of time preparing to die. And when I tell that to people, they're like, "What does that mean?" Like, I wasn't, like, crying, or I was just like, "Oh, you know, gotta get my affairs in order because if I die, I don't wanna be a burden to anybody."
Hmm.
So I just sort of kept myself in the motions, and I kept my brain busy. So I didn't have like time to feel sorry for myself. That's really what it was. There was never a point where I was like, poor me, what am I gonna do now? I'm gonna be depressed and I'm gonna be sad. I didn't go through those motions at the time.
Hmm. Yeah, and so I'm curious after the event. Generally, when somebody goes through a traumatic event, whether it's a diagnosis and overcoming that, or whether it's a near death experience, they oftentimes have a new lease on life and a new view on life. Like it really snaps them and gets them hyper focused. So I'm curious for you, what was that thing? Did that happen to you in terms of a lot of your priorities change and how you saw life was different?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm the same person that I was prior to being diagnosed with breast cancer. I think I've my mind, my mentality, everything has changed. Um, and that's just because I during my journey, I did a lot of work, and then sort of I was forced into therapy, and that was really good for me because therapy helped me deal with the disease, but it also helped me deal with a lot of personal things that I had not processed or dealt with in my past. So, 7 years later, I'm still in therapy because I'm still processing. But what breast cancer did for me was it took me on a journey of changing who I was for the better. One of an example of that is I used to be a control freak. And all of a sudden, I'm going through this thing where I cannot control my outcomes. I can't control my life. I can't control my schedule because I have to go and do treatments. I have to go to surgery. And it made me just change how I function, how I work, how I do my scheduling. And I had to rely on other people, which was also something that was really, really hard for me. So there was all these areas of my life that I had so much control over that I lost control when I
Hmm.
was going through breast cancer. And losing that control really allowed me to open myself up to discover what I could do with that. And I was able to really turn all of these weaknesses, I call them weaknesses because I was such a control freak in everything. And don't get me wrong, there's still areas of my life where I'm a bit of a control freak. Like my schedule is a thing that like if my friend calls me, they're like, "You want to go grab a coffee?" I'll put it on my schedule. Like
Oh wow.
everything is there. That's also because I'm really busy, but it just
Yeah.
sort of works for me. But I think once I open up and to new possibilities, to doing things different, to relying on other people, like my friends would beg me to come pick me up at the hospital because I'm like, nope, I'm going to take an Uber there. And then when I'm done surgery and they let me out, I'll call an Uber and take it home. But then I realized I couldn't do that because I was in rough shape. So it helped me be more vulnerable as well.
Yeah. I hear the thing with being a control freak is it's very or quote unquote a control freak as they call it.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of the same in terms of like if I'm going out or there's a dinner, I just it just puts me at ease. It just puts me at ease because for one, left to my own devices, I'm highly unproductive, and I can get lost and easily distracted. So that's one thing
Mhm.
is just because of my brain and how that works. But and I think it's also a I don't know. I think I see it in a lot of entrepreneurs that have this thing which is control and trying to control every single thing in their life. And so I'm also curious. That's another thing I'm curious about. So to add that to the number that you are on the in terms of being a child, whatever you are on that. I'm also curious about this with entrepreneurs. Why are they such control freaks? Um, do you have any theories on that?
Yeah. Well, listen, I think it's just because, this is their life. This is their livelihood. and they got into it, and now it's either they're going to make it or they're going to fail. And in between those two things, there's a lot. There's, if you fail, there's shame. There's I told you so, right? That you have to deal with the people who told you don't do it because it's not a good idea. So the failure thought of it, I think, is what really drives people to become such control freaks and like so dominant on like I got to make this work, where they give up all of their personal time and they become workaholics because failure is almost not an option, and you don't want to be ashamed of that failure, right? Because there's probably people who told you don't do that. Stay.
Yeah.
What do you mean you're going to quit your, 6-figure paying job and you're going to go work for yourself? Like, who does that, right? So I think entrepreneurs are a little bit more control freaks than just focus because they have a lot more to lose.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so, one of the things when you talked about therapy, and I was back in therapy myself,
Mhm.
and I noticed that sometimes a lot of our life problems are usually let me rephrase that. A lot of times the problems that we have in business are not really business problems, and even
Mm.
like health problems are not necessarily health problems most of the time. It's
Yeah.
really a life problem. Do you agree with that? What do you think?
I do. I do agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I just found that very interesting that a lot of times, I never understood the adage when they said entrepreneurship is one of the greatest personal development journeys that you'll go on. And I definitely wholeheartedly understand that now.
Yeah. It's very
And,
therapeutic because you go through so many ups and downs, things that you don't understand, that you
mhm.
have to put in the extra work to understand. Or you
Yeah.
have to get a business coach who's gonna help you understand, because these are all areas you've never been in before, uh, in business or in life, or maybe you've had some traumas in your childhood that you've just blocked things to these new possibilities and you don't even know how to go about them, right? So entrepreneurship does push you a little further to be more curious and different work ethic, right? Not everyone can run a business. Not everyone can. You know how many entrepreneurs I know that are just stuck for years and years and years in that very beginning stage. And I
Mhm.
know a lot of tech entrepreneurs that are like, I have an idea, I've built the idea, and then that's it. It's just an idea that they've built, and they've not been able to execute it from there. They're stuck because
Mhm.
they haven't built out those skills.
Mm. And so to build out those skills, that's where you think things like it's usually something internal, right? Is that what you're
Yeah.
thinking? Yeah.
Yeah, like first of all, if you can't motivate yourself, then you can't be an entrepreneur.
Mhm.
Like if you need to have a coach constantly, go, you can do it. Like it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
If your partner has to be the person pushing you, then you're not an entrepreneur and you're not really good at business if you only do the work when your partner or someone in your life is pushing you. You have to be able to do that yourself. And
Mhm.
if you can't, you're not going to get anything done. Like people get stuck in their heads, right? And if they meet up with a friend and they talk about what's stuck in their head, their friends are like, "Oh, have you thought about this, and that?" And all of a sudden they feel really motivated and they're like, "Yeah, I'm going to go do that." And then something else comes up and they get stuck in the head. As an entrepreneur, you have to be able to process and deal with that on your own without depending 100% on other people. Yes, it's important to have people in your life that are going to motivate you and coach you, but you have to get to a point where you can do that yourself.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. That's a very important point. And, since we're talking about therapy and mental health in general, and that's something that a lot of entrepreneurs and founders struggle with a lot. Other than perhaps therapy, what do you think are some other beneficial things for founders in terms of maintaining their mental health and
Yeah.
trying their best to be a well-rounded person? And well-rounded is going to mean different things for a lot of us.
Yeah. So I'm a little biased in this because I love to read. I
Hmm.
Reading is I'm on a mission right now to read one book per month for the whole year.
Hmm.
And it doesn't matter. It can be it can be a story, it can be a lesson. I just love to read. But I was talking to someone a while back, and they told me before I started my reading journey, and they said to me, you know, not enough people read. People should read more often. And I'm like, why? And they're like, think about it. You have wisdom and knowledge from people who lived thousands of years ago. or 20 years ago or 60 years ago who have imparted all of this wisdom and knowledge and left it for us. And we're not utilizing it because it's in a book.
Mm.
So I was like, that's to me, that was deep. I'm like, wow, I like that. I can go and read something that somebody wrote 1,000 years ago and like really learn something from it. And so I started reading and I started reading different types of books, a lot of like obviously self-discovery, some therapy books. I read a book, amazing book that's called Before You Can Love Other People, Learn How to Love Yourself, which is written by a psychologist, and I thought it was very interesting. But reading for me has just opened my eyes to so many different perspectives and uh, coping mechanisms and how to process trauma from childhood. I feel like from reading these books, I've discovered things about myself and my childhood that I didn't even remember or I haven't fully processed. And now I'm thinking about it and I'm like, oh, okay, I got to really do this. So that's it for me. It's really reading. I think it's completely changed my world.
Yeah, I so many things right there. I'm going to check that book out. That sounds interesting. Something I need to read.
I,
But
I'm gonna I'll send you the exact name because I think I said it wrong.
okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
The thing with reading also, I wholeheartedly agree with that. Is that a lot of times I think whatever stage that you're at with your business journey or career journey, I think a lot of times we can feel like, man, all these things are happening to me, and you might almost get that little bug in your ear that like your problems are just one of like none others.
Mhm.
And then the thing is, you go through all these different biographies of people in so many different things, and you realize, wow, this is really just like a story arc. That everyone's story, the reason why we admire all these people is because of they had some type of obstacle they had to overcome.
Yeah.
Some it's physical, some it's psychological, some it's emotional, and they overcame it to build and do whatever they are doing. And so for me now, I start to look at this and try to remind myself, this is just part of my story arc that's
Yeah.
going to help someone else years down the line keep going and whatnot. And so, and also reading books, even though the people were not there physically, it helped me not feel as lonely because I
Yeah.
was like, oh, okay, yeah, there's other people here too. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not the only one with this. And so even if you didn't have like your community of people that really just understood the lifestyle that you're working toward and building, you had these books. And I guess me being an only child, I'm pro at using my imagination in terms of having
Mm.
friends, imaginary
Yeah.
friends, and all this stuff. And so it was very easy to start doing this with the book. And I was like, these are like some of my friends. I've even named some of the people like this is my uncle, this is like some of my
Okay.
cousins, and just like getting crazy like that. And it gave me a little solace in terms of just keep going, especially on the days that it's very hard.
Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with you. And I think that's the beauty of books because you're learning from people who have been there and done it and have been there and done the exact same things that you may have.
hmm Yeah. And, as we're talking about your journey and everything, there's a word that just easily sticks out. And I'm sure listeners are going to think of this as well. And I just hear resilience. And so I'm curious, what does resilience mean to you?
Resilience to me means being strong and just getting through it.
hmm I
Yeah.
like that. I like that. Simple and concise.
Yeah.
And yeah. Um, you mentioned earlier about letting go and delegating. And I was going to ask you a leadership question. Do you think that's the biggest lesson you've learned about leadership is letting go and delegating, or is there something even more important that you learned?
I think that is one of the biggest ones. I mean, because I was a control freak, that was a big one for me because the minute I let go and I started delegating, I realized that, hey, like I had hired these people to do these jobs. They were qualified for it and I wasn't, but I wasn't letting them. And so I was holding them back by saying, "Oh, if you want something done, you got to do it yourself," right?
hmm
So the minute I started letting that go, it was better for me because now I could focus on my health, and it was better for the team because it's like, oh, she's now letting us do the job that she hired us for. Number one, and then when my treatments sort of ended and I came back, and I'm like, oh, I have so much time. I can do other things that are more important. I don't have to go and do that. Oh, well, maybe I'm gonna like start having conversations with people, like it just and now I like it. And I don't ever want to go back. I'm not a
Yeah.
micromanager. I'm like, you have a job to do. I trust you. Go ahead, be gone. And
Mhm.
I can focus on doing things that are really going to help us grow and are really important and are the things that I should be doing.
Mhm. Yeah, and funny enough, when you hear that, a lot of times, if you can hear that leaders, because I come from the health world, you can hear that leaders a lot of times say, "I don't have a lot of time to take care of my health, to
Mm,
exercise, and all of that." And a lot of times, if they actually just relinquish control a little bit and stop micromanaging and trying to do everything, just like it freed up your time to explore other activities, the
yeah,
same thing that can be for leaders' health and allow
yeah,
them to apply ample amount of time for their physical fitness if they just learn to let go, learn to,
yeah.
yeah. So I
I
like
also
that.
think I also think that, like, people are really hard on themselves because we see other leaders getting up at 4 a.m., exercising, having a green smoothie before they go to the office. And, by the time they get to the office, they've done like a million different things.
Hmm.
And I remember there was a point in my life where I'm like, wow, I'm such a failure. Like, how come I can't do that? How come I
Hmm.
can't wake up at that time? And then I really stopped to think about it and I'm like, okay, one thing that's really important for me and for my body is rest. I
Hmm.
need to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep. So it is so unrealistic for me to tell myself that I'm going to get up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. and go to a yoga class and make myself a coffee or a green smoothie and all this stuff, right? I mean, I was putting all this pressure on myself. And I think it was really discovering a routine that works for me, not based on what everyone else is doing. Right? It's,
Hmm.
"Okay, I'm not gonna get up at 4 AM. I'm gonna get up at 6:37, and I'm not gonna go work out. I'm gonna take a shower, I'm gonna walk to the office or drive, and then when I get there, I'm gonna grab myself a coffee. I'm not gonna read a book and write on." Like, you have to be realistic to what you can and cannot do. Because I think when you do that, that's when you start opening yourself up to doing all those other things. Okay, well, maybe I'm a night owl. I'm gonna go do it after work because that feels better for me.
Hmm.
Or you naturally start getting up, an hour earlier and be like, you know what? I am going to do this one thing and I'm going to do it every day with consistency. I
Hmm.
think we just need to stop comparing ourselves to like these big CEOs that have, delegate almost everything and have time to really focus on their health. And I think
Yeah.
we have to be really realistic about what we can and cannot do.
Yeah. And it also gets into the thing of also learning to run your own race. And I think a lot of times with, with entrepreneurs and people is that sometimes we want to build a company a certain size and you really get down to it and you're like, why do you want to do that? And it's like, well, I think I'm supposed to always want to infinitely scale, just scale completely, even if it's not something that you really want to do, because
Yeah.
the larger you get, you have a lot more responsibilities and different things and then that might take you out of what you really enjoyed about business. And so a
Yeah.
lot of times I think it's important, kind of like you said, to pause and really say, is this really right for me? Or am I doing this because this is what I think I'm supposed to do?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes I talk to people and they're like, I went into this because I wanted to be $1 million company. And
Hmm.
now I'm $1 billion company and I have no time for my kids and I have all this money, but that's not what the goal was. And it's okay not you don't have to go that
Hmm.
high. If you just want to be $1 million company for the next 5, 6, 10 years and have a great life, do it, right? It's
Yeah.
okay. We don't always necessarily have to keep aiming higher and higher. It's
Hmm.
okay to feel comfortable where you are and be happy.
Yeah. Because there's a lot of people who have a lot and they're still not fulfilled. And there's a lot of people who, quote unquote, don't have a lot of the
Yeah,
material things and they're way more fulfilled than the billionaire that we look up to.
yeah. Well, also, I think that, like, the more you have, the more you want or need,
Hmm.
right? Because now you put yourself at a different scale.
Yeah. And I find it's ironic that we come full circle, kind of what we talked about at the beginning of where like, um, looking at the small wins, thinking about today, and it just acknowledging those little small things. So it's interesting how that works out. I'm curious also now, what made you start the podcast?
Podcast, yes. So when I was in tech and I started in tech like early and it was a very male dominated space and when I lost my team, I felt really alone. I was really like lonely, not like, oh, I don't have any friends, but I'm like, I don't have like anyone to bounce ideas off of. Like, I didn't have anybody. And so I went through it like alone, and I would go to conferences and I would listen to all of these speakers on stage, but then I wouldn't have access to them, right? I could only take notes of what they were saying and go with it. So come full circle today, I'm like, well, like I've really learned a lot in this space, and I've done a lot. Why can't I create a space with people who have been there and done it, and give that information out to people like me, 18 years ago, so that they can learn from the people who have been there and done it and not feel so lonely. And so, yeah, I started a podcast with CEOs and founders who have sort of gone through that early stage and that founding journey. And everyone has a different story about what they went through and what it took to get to a million. And did they decide to stay there or go higher? And if going higher, what does that mean? And I just wanted it to be a place where people could go and listen to other people, give them advice in areas that that they might be struggling with.
Mhm. What's been one of the biggest lessons that you've learned from podcasting and talking to so many people?
Oh my gosh, I feel like everybody I talk to, it's a lesson for me. It's hard for me to pick
Same here.
one. Yeah, right. I'm like, wait, is this really selfishly for other people, or is this really for me, right?
Yeah,
Because I'm
right.
like, you always get to learn something new. But I
Mhm,
think that's what it is. You never stop learning in this life. And
mhm,
I went out on this journey to help other people learn, but the beauty of it is that I get to continue learning, and I get to ask the questions that I want to ask, and I get to have these like conversations with these wonderful people who are willing to give me their time and talk about their stories and their journeys, and like, what else can you ask for in life?
Yeah, I mean, if anything, that is the best benefit of it is really just
Yeah,
to there's so many fascinating people and like you said,
stories.
and stories, and then for some reason, I feel like it works out. Like you end up talking to people at the right time of a lesson or something that you're thinking through, and then
Yeah,
they just end up talking about it, and you're like, "Oh, that's it. That's it." I
that's
tell you,
me.
it happens every time. Like over the last week, there's been certain themes in my head, and like my last 3 interviews have all like centered around that.
Yeah.
It not directly necessarily, but indirectly through some of the lessons, and so I just found that very fascinating how that works.
Yeah, I agree. I've learned a lot about marketing. I
Mhm.
thought we were doing a really good job, and then I'll have an interview and I'm like, huh, interesting. I didn't know you could do that. Well, after this interview, I got to go talk to my team and figure this out. So it's like continuous growth.
Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, one of the big things is it's been mindset and really being persistent. And so I was like, I thought I was persistent and consistent. And then like a lot of my guests have really showed no, there's a whole another level of persistence and consistency. And that's been inspiring
Yeah,
for me.
I love consistency. I'm like the queen of it.
Yeah. So I've been guilty of the person who really performs well for like 2 to 3 days. And then
Oh, okay.
then it's not as consistent, right? And so
Yeah.
as I'm learning, and and I know this concept when it comes to fitness that
Mhm.
a little bit every day
Yeah.
is going to go long. Then it's because it's the equivalent of somebody working out on Monday for 2 hours
Yeah.
and then they don't work out the rest of the week.
Ex- yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I'm curious, what does success mean to you?
Success me What success means to me is, I say this a lot and people are probably tired of hearing me say it. It's peace.
Hmm.
It's just being at a place in my life where everything is just working out. Um, I'm at peace. I'm not stressed out. I'm not running around like a chicken with my head cut off. I don't need a whole lot. I just want to do what I love every day and be at peace with myself
Hmm.
and those around me. That's
Now,
success to me.
that's a beautiful place to get to. And
Yeah.
I imagine that therapy and really getting and journaling and getting clear on your values got you to that place? Because I'm sure you probably had something totally different in terms of what success meant before that time.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And like, yeah, for sure. And it's helped me with like even relationships. Like
Mhm.
I've really, really, really done the work, and it's ongoing work. It's
Mhm.
again, consistency. I love it because I'm doing it all the time. But it's really about like just being consistent. Okay, I see a pattern here, and being self-aware. Like I know I do this every single time. So when are you going to start changing it, Sonia? Okay, no, this is the time for me to start changing it. And it was when I started making those changes, which is what I call doing the work, when I really started like taking what I was reading in books and what I was getting in therapy, and then seeing, oh crap, that really does work. Oh, did I just do that differently? I found myself this weekend. I was in a situation where I did something that I would never normally do, and I was talking to someone, and I'm like, that's not me, but I like it because I went and did something completely different. I got out of my comfort zone, and and I was just very, very different person. And I'm like, I like this. Now I'm seeing the results of all the work.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think entrepreneurs struggle so much with relationships? Speaking of relationships.
Hi. Well, I mean, I'm gonna assume to say that it's probably because they don't have a lot of time.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes too, I'm not saying this about myself, but I actually know a couple people that because they're entrepreneurs and they're always looking for success, they expect their partners to be at the same level.
Mhm.
And I actually know someone where their partner has a job, loves it, is content, happy, but because he's an entrepreneur, he expects her to get to that level as well and be an entrepreneur. But she's like, I don't want to be. Like,
Yeah.
I'm happy. So that could be another, another thing.
Yeah. And so, for the rest of the year, I guess, what are a couple of things that you're looking most forward to for the remainder of this year?
Going on a vacation. I haven't gone on a vacation since 2020.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So going on a vacation, hanging out with my cat.
Once again, this sounds like peace. So you're
Yeah,
very consistent.
reading some books.
You're very consistent, right?
Yeah, going for a walk, enjoying nature before the winter comes. Just nothing crazy. I'm a pretty simple person.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
peace is so important to me that I don't want to do anything that's going to disrupt it. And that's not always a good thing.
True, but at least you're consistent. So you still got consistency right there for you. So you are consistent across the board. And so as we get ready to wrap this up, I've really enjoyed this conversation. One of the last questions, or probably the last question I'm going to ask you is: someone walks up to you in a coffee shop and they're promising not to disturb your peace, and they're going to ask you, "What are 3 things that I can do today to become a more resilient founder and ultimately succeed against all odds?" What are those 3 things you'll tell them?
Be curious, for sure.
Mhm.
Be willing to be self-aware, and if you're not, learn how to be self-aware, and learn from your failures and fail over and over and over again, and learn from that and pick yourself up and make it better. I think failures is, if you're not failing, you're not learning, you're not doing anything differently.
Mhm. Oh, I love that. And where can listeners keep up with you at?
So I have a website. It's called soniacouto.com. And there you can find out everything about me, my work, my podcasts. Email me, reach out. I do a lot of mentorship for women in tech as well, and who are trying to either start or pivot. So if anybody wants any advice, I always try to get back to people. I'm happy to do it.
Awesome to hear, and I will have those links in the website in there for everyone. And until next time, everyone out there, stay awesome, be limitless, and as always, go be the CEO of your health and your life. Peace.